another video in my series on why Muslim apologetics are so bad. This is a video titled The Most Direct Proof That the Koran is from Allah, from a channel called Arabic 101. I think it's Dr. Hassan Al-Husseini who is speaking in the video. And let me just say, I love the animation. Let's see if the argument is any good.
This is Professor Muhammad Mustafa Al-A'zami, a brilliant Muslim scholar who did something that no one had thought of before. He compiled a book that could statistically prove the divine source of the Quran.
I wonder how it will do that.
But the crazy thing is that the book contains none of his words. No commentary, no explanation, no personal input whatsoever.
Okay, I guess that's interesting.
Just pure, irrefutable proof.
Wow, you are really building this up. Better be good.
So, what is it? And how can a book with no author input prove anything? Well, we're about to find out. The book we're talking about is titled النص القرآني الخالد عبر العصور, the eternal Quranic text across the ages. And the idea behind it is quite simple, yet incredibly powerful. It is based on a detailed word-for-word comparison of a single surah of the Quran, Surah Al-Isra, comparing between a modern printed copy of the Mus'haf that you probably have today at home to the most ancient manuscripts from different ages, ranging from the 1st century of Hijrah, at the time of the Sahaba, all the way to the present day. In his research, he used 18 different manuscripts from different time periods, countries, and sources, including the Birmingham manuscripts, the Sana'a manuscripts, the Samarkand Mus'haf, the Topkapi Mus'haf, which is attributed to Uthman ibn Affan, may Allah be pleased with him. Also, the Rampur Mus'haf, which is attributed to Ali ibn Abi Talib, may Allah be pleased with him, the Mus'haf of Ibn Bawab, and many others from different centuries. And when he compared all of them, word for word, the result was nothing short of a miracle.
I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say it's probably gonna be a lot short of a miracle. Let's see.
Here you can see the first verse of Surah Al-Isra. The first line shows the modern printed version. And in the second line, it is the same text but without diacritics or dots for easier comparison, since the older manuscripts didn't contain any diacritics or dots. And then below, all the corresponding words from each manuscript. Every single word is shown across different mushafs and manuscripts, covering a span of 15 centuries, revealing an astonishing fact that doesn't need commentary or explanation. Keep your eyes on the first 4 or 5 words and see how each and every word remained exactly the same over a period of 14 centuries. The book then goes on and on comparing every ayah, every word of the surah. And despite coming from different times, regions, materials, and even writing styles, not a single word is missing or added. This is what perfect preservation looks like.
Okay, so it seems like you're saying that Islamic scribes have a very good mechanism for ensuring accurate copies are made. Although you didn't say anything about the manuscript selection process for the book, or whether these manuscripts are, in some sense, representative of all manuscripts ever produced. That would be interesting information to include. I mean, if these are all famous manuscripts, as you say, that kind of already suggests that they were preserved for a reason, and there's probably some selection bias here. But anyway, when do we get to the miracle?
After this comparison, the author presents a graph showing the percentage of match between all of these manuscripts. And as you can see, the matching percentage is very high across the board, with the lowest match percentage of 92.6% for the Mus'haf of Ibn Bawab. But wait a minute, shouldn't this be 100% if we're talking about perfect preservation?
Well, I thought we were talking about proof that the Koran is from Allah. Why do I care about how it was preserved in the Middle Ages? I'm really only interested in that first copy and who actually wrote it.
Well, yes, but here's the thing. These differences are not about missing, added, or substituted words. They are just simply spelling differences. And to be more specific, they are orthographic differences, like color and color, center and center. And as examples from the book, the word al-aqsa is written here with an alif, but in other manuscripts with an alif maqsura. The word subhan may appear in some with an alif, but in other manuscripts it is written with a dagger alif. Other examples like as-samawat, barakna, all have the same type of variations.
Okay, so again, great copy control is what it seems like. I mean, that is to be expected in a way for a community that believes the sacred text cannot vary. You find something rather similar for the Masoretic text of the Torah once it was standardized. Copying was extremely reliable over many centuries, with faulty copies being promptly removed from circulation. For example, the Ein Gedi scroll of Leviticus from sometime around the 300s CE is reported to be the same as the current version. It doesn't require a miracle, it just requires a certain culture that is dedicated to rigorously copying texts exactly.
Sometimes with an alif, sometimes with a dagger alif. So it is not that these words are misspelled. They just followed a different method to spell the same word. And that's why all of these words are still pronounced the same, which is the main point, since the Quran is primarily an oral text, meant to be recited, preserved through recitation, and not just writing. And so, Surah Al-Isra, which consists of 1,559 words, has had every single one of its words preserved across all manuscripts, across the ages, since the day it was revealed.
Well, I think you are supposed to be proving that it was revealed, which you haven't done. You just told me that Islamic culture had a great scribal tradition. And did you say whether this surah is representative of the Quran as a whole? 1,500 words must be just a tiny fraction of the Quran, so I don't know what I should infer from this. But anyway, how does any of this prove anything about the divinity of that very first edition?
This simple word-for-word comparison across centuries is all it takes to demonstrate the miraculous preservation of the Quran.
Sorry, what part was miraculous? Do you mean miraculous like they say a baseball outfielder made a miraculous catch? As in pretty amazing? Sure, I'll give you that. Precise copy control like that is pretty amazing.
Something no other book in history can claim.
I think the Torah does a decent enough job once the apparatus was put in place to ensure precise copying, like I said. If that apparatus had been in place earlier, you'd have better copies even earlier. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of old manuscripts of the Torah around, partly because, Jews were a persecuted minority both in the Islamic and Christian worlds, and governments there were more interested in destroying Jewish artifacts than preserving them. But I'm glad you have so many manuscripts, so nice for you.
But do you want to appreciate this study even more? Well, let's look at a similar study conducted by researcher Peter Gary on the Greek manuscripts of the Bible. In his research, he compared 350 manuscripts to each other out of the total of 5,800 available Greek manuscripts, and he found a staggering number of differences between them. Can you take a guess of how many differences he found?
I wouldn't even venture to do so, nor do I know whether this comparison makes any sense without knowing which Greek manuscripts were being considered, how many, who made them, and where, and what kinds of beliefs the copyists had about the texts they were copying. From the little I know about early religious writings, the people passing on the tradition may have been more concerned about getting the theology right rather than getting the words exactly right. There are a lot of things you need to work out before you can make a fair comparison of the Koran and the New Testament as far as manuscript fidelity. And again, I've said it before, why do I care?
100? 1,000? 10,000? Even 100,000? Nope, none of them is correct. According to his study, which I linked in the description, there were over 500,000 variations across just those 350 manuscripts.
Okay, but what if he had selected just 18 of those manuscripts, those textually closest to each other, and just a couple chapters each to look at? That would be a more reasonable comparison, but even still, it doesn't mean anything to me without understanding the apparatus for making copies and the significance for the scribes of making those copies exact. And it neglects differences between the Greek and Arabic languages, such as in vowelization and grammar, that will have an effect on the kinds of errors that might be created. Frankly, I think a comparison with the Masoretic text of the Hebrew Torah would have been more interesting, at least for manuscripts produced after the Jewish scribal tradition solidified.
He even created a helpful table showing the average number of variations per word. In Matthew, for example, there is an average of 5 variations per word. In Titus, around 7 variations per word. In the first letter of John, a bit better fortunately, about only 2 variations per word. If you think those numbers sound exaggerated or hard to believe, I strongly encourage you to read the study yourself. So, when you see these facts and understand how much can go wrong over the centuries with any written text, it makes you truly appreciate the miraculous nature of the preservation of the Quran.
Well, I definitely do appreciate the attention to preservation. You have not explained why I should regard it as miraculous, however. If you have developed a culture whose core principle is that we do not permit error when we copy the Koran, and you restrict copying to people who are committed to that and eliminate any copies and copyists that fail in that commitment, I'm really not so surprised that you can pull that off. And also, I still don't care because you are trying to prove that the very first copy was written by Allah. That's the title of your video.
And so, there is no better way to end this video than with the words of Allah.
Alright, well that was some bad apologetic. No evidence of any kind that the Quran was written or inspired by Allah, or that it is in any way divine. Just a nice tribute to a scribal culture that cares very deeply about preserving their precious cultural heritage. And that's great for them. But certainly no reason for me to think that there's any miracles at work.